MKUltra is not the name of a new James Bond movie. It is, or rather was, the code word for a secret CIA project, which took place between 1953 and 1964, in which unsuspecting people were used in mind control experiments that left them emotionally crippled for life. MKUltra consisted of more than 130 research programs, which took place in prisons, hospitals, and universities all across the United States. This was the introduction to a portion of an episode of 60 Minutes and was hosted and narrated by the now-deceased American journalist Ed Bradley. After months and months of requests and more months of delays, the video that many of you have been waiting for is here. I promised you that I would take a deeper dive into Project MKUltra and into further projects of mind control and projects designed by the government to control the public eye. However, there have been many reasons as to why I was hesitant to make this video, let alone the next two that will follow this one. What I will discuss in this 3-part series of videos extends far beyond the scope of programs like MKUltra and dives into very deep and complex questions, such as the idea of free will and the issue of privacy on a level never seen before. Rightly so, this video has been a long time coming and will serve as the perfect tie-in to the rest of what will come throughout this series. This is Mind Control and the Pursuit of Power, Part 1. To gain a better understanding of why MKUltra is important in today's world, aside from being the inspiration for the award-winning and critically acclaimed Netflix series Stranger Things, we need to take a brief dive into the history of the project. At the time, the United States government feared that the Soviet Union, China, and North Korean government agents were using mind control to brainwash American prisoners of war in Korea. As a result, then director of the CIA, Alan Dulles, approved Project MKUltra and set it into motion in 1953. Due to paranoia and rumors along spy chains that the Soviet Union could gain control over a new psychoactive drug known now to the public as LSD, the United States sent 2 spies over to Basel, Switzerland, to buy out every known drop of LSD in existence at the time. What they ended up purchasing was 10 grams of LSD-25, which is enough LSD to dose over half of the American population. Their hope was to utilize the new drug to conduct mind control experiments in what would later be known as Operation Midnight Climax. The earliest experiments conducted in this project were simple and considered highly unethical by today's research standards. The first experiments with LSD were headed by chemist and poison expert Sidney Gottlieb. Operation Midnight Climax was conducted with the aid of hired prostitutes who would lure unsuspecting men into CIA safe houses, where they would be drugged while Gottlieb and other CIA agents would drink cocktails from behind a 2-way mirror. Recording devices disguised as electrical outlets were hidden within the rooms to document the experiments further. There was little government oversight and little concern for the people who were subjected to these experiments. Ken Kesey, author of the 1962 novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, was one of the voluntary participants of the MKUltra experiments, who later promoted LSD-fueled parties that were later referred to as acid tests. These types of parties were often paired with psychedelic visuals and music, and are largely contributed to having given rise to the 1960s psychedelic drug scene. Other notable people such as the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski and Boston mobster James Joseph Bolger reportedly volunteered for the experiments involved in MKUltra. After the rise of the hippie culture that would come to define a generation of rebels who stood against the government, the methods by which the initial tests were conducted came to light within the CIA and brought the LSD experiments of MKUltra to an end. Nearly a decade later, in 1974, New York Times journalist Seymour Hersh published his report documenting how the CIA had conducted non-consensual drug experiments and had set up illegal spying operations on American citizens. His report detailed the hoops that he had to travel through to bring the long-suppressed details of Project MKUltra to light. In 1975, President Ford launched the President's Commission on CIA Activities and launched an investigation led by Vice President Nelson Rockefeller and would later be referred to as the Rockefeller Commission. The Church Committee was formed in the same year and was helmed by Idaho Senator Frank Church and was intended to investigate the abuses of federal intelligence agencies during and after the resignation of former President Richard Nixon. What the Church Committee came across were plots to assassinate foreign leaders, as well as thousands of documents related to Project MKUltra. With these new revelations that had been finally made known to the public, President Ford passed an executive order in 1976 that prohibited, and I quote, experimentation with drugs on human subjects except with the informed consent in writing and witnessed by a disinterested party of each such human subject. Among LSD, other drugs such as heroin, methamphetamine, barbiturates, and MDMA were used in experiments on people to test the power of suggestion and how much control they could have over people. The original goal was to utilize these drugs to manipulate people by drugging them into a trained, zombie-like state where they would go in, commit some form of prepared act, and after their job was completed, they would wake up the next day and remember nothing that had happened. While LSD did nothing more for the CIA other than serve as the recreational drug of choice for many of the people who spoke out in rejection of the federal government during the 60s, there were other unethical experiments that took place between the years of 1953 and 1963 that were done in the pursuit of understanding how to control the human mind. In spite of the CIA having destroyed countless numbers of documents related to MKUltra, more information on the project has recently been declassified and released to the public. Just this past December, more documents were declassified and documented experiments conducted on 6 dogs where they had mind control devices surgically implanted into their skulls and attached to their brains in order to test the possibility of controlling someone's mind through a machine. The experiments have been mostly forgotten about by the public eye, save for those who are fans of Stranger Things and are aware of where the inspiration for this show came from. Most of us tend to forget basic things from time to time, but the reason courses like history are still mandated in public schools is because we, as the public, generally should know of the changes and events that led us to our current day, for better or for worse. The experiments of MKUltra were largely a failure, but were the inspiration for a number of other experiments that would follow and have inspired some future experiments, some of which are still going on to this very day. For if you cannot control the minds of those you deem a threat or see as a potential ally, then you can try to control the environment in which they live and conduct themselves. Or perhaps you could control the market by which they buy and sell goods. Or perhaps you could control the information and news being shared to these people and create your own narrative. Or perhaps you could do all of that and more. While some people would rather forget about or diminish the significance of history, others will purposefully hide the intentions and acts led by certain groups throughout history, and may still hide their true intentions in plain sight.
It's all part of the Chinese government's new social credit system.
What you do, say, and even think is being monitored and marked against you.
This chilling image is just a glimpse into the human rights abuses happening in China right now. Satellite shots are reportedly re-education centers, although Chinese officials insist they are vocational education and employment training centers.
I find it very frightening, the fact that technology has now made the dystopian novels of the 20th century seem almost quaint because the level of surveillance is so great and very inconsistent with our own views and our own society.
Jaywalking, smoking, too many video games, that is not good news for the coolest kid in 7th grade.
Well, it's very important in our day-to-day lives. Our senses are adapted for telling us how the world around us is, and if we don't know how the world around us actually is, then we're not going to behave very well in it.
If you go on Facebook, a New York Times article looks exactly like a Breitbart article, looks exactly like a Newsmax article, and then you choose the one you like, and then you like it to your friends, and sooner or later you've created a cocoon of information and a kind of thought bubble that you then live in.
I think it's a disgrace that information that was false and fake and never happened got released to the public.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time.
Jordan Peele created this fake video of President Obama to demonstrate how easy it is to put words in someone else's mouth.
Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet.
The truth is, our nation is more divided than ever. The truth is, alternative facts are just way delusional.
The media needs to be held accountable. The truth is, locker room talk is harmless. The truth is, we need to put the safety of the American people. The truth is, we need a full investigation of any ties to Russia.
Picking up where we last left off with Project MKUltra, the journey into investigating and discussing mind control and the pursuit of power over people has only just begun. Project MKUltra is not the first project conducted by a government to try and control the mind of the people, and it certainly will not be the last. There are many different kinds of mind control that both governments and corporations have utilized to try and control power over people throughout the past. From the propaganda machines of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, to more modern-day means of controlling people, such as controlling the news media and the spread of information, the world has and continues to experience the effect of powerful influences that are all vying to control the people. Consider this episode only a part of a bigger puzzle that is meant to explain only some of the programs that exist in the world today and to serve as a light by which to illuminate and showcase the true scale by which both government and corporations are trying to control us. Let's start with the elephant in the room. Many of you recall from the last episode the montage that was included regarding China's social credit system. Well, this social credit system is already partly in place within China, and according to Business Insider, certain restrictions go back as far as 2017, with plans being made for all of China's citizens to be ranked within a social credit score. Think of shows like the one from Black Mirror Season 3, where one of the main characters is worried about her social credit score going down, as her score going down affects everything from her ability to travel and her ability to live comfortably within her standard of living. A similar system is being implemented in China that affects everything from your ability to send your children to the best schools to what basic jobs you can apply for. According to policy documents that were obtained by Business Insider, here is what can happen to you if you happen to be a low scorer. You won't be considered for public office. You'll lose access to Social Security and welfare. You'll be frisked more thoroughly when passing through Chinese customs. You'll be shut out of senior level positions in the food and drug sector. You won't get a bed in overnight trains. You'll be shut out of higher starred hotels and restaurants and will be rejected by travel agents. And your children won't be allowed into more expensive private schools. To some people, this may not sound like the worst thing in the world, but please think about it further. How much freedom do you really have over yourself when things like this and the basic ability to own a dog or have a decent internet connection are all contingent on the appearance and behavior you exude in public? Not only that, but your score is affected by who you socialize with, and your score can fluctuate depending on how you behave and who you are interacting with in passing. China intends on installing over 400 million facial recognition cameras across its many provinces to observe its people and monitor who they are with and what they are doing. If this does not sound like an attempt at controlling the minds of the people, or like the premise of a Black Mirror episode, then honestly, I don't exactly know how I could convince you otherwise. However, don't think that you might be safe living abroad from government programs that have been designed to control the minds and control the power and information that people have. The American government has had several secret operations and deceptive motives for trying to gain more information and power over people than it would like to admit. One of the more recent and prominent cases of this was during both 2015 and 2016, during a dispute between tech giant Apple and the FBI. The FBI were trying to access the phone contents of an iPhone that was used by a terrorist suspect who was involved in the December 2015 San Bernardino shooting, and wanted Apple to create a back door into the software that would allow the FBI to gain access to the contents within the phone. Apple took a stand and said no to the FBI, stating that such an action would be very, very dangerous, and if it fell into the wrong hands, could jeopardize the safety and security of millions of Apple product users. After a court case came to pass, the FBI dropped all charges against Apple, stating that it was able to hack into the phone anyways. Moves by agencies like the FBI to do rather shady things, like gain access to millions of phones across the world, are not new. The NSA has had a history of spying on the American people and on other nations, and after the leaks by a one Edward Snowden revealed just how much information they were able to access, only now is the NSA considering ending the phone surveillance program that had been exposed by Snowden. Many of these measures were taken by the American government with claims that they were taken to protect the American people against terroristic threats, as well as making arguments that only bad guys need to worry about hiding anything. The problem with that logic is that it assumes that people or artificial intelligence are not capable of viewing or accessing our information through the government tools that I have just mentioned. I will not be linking to any of these websites myself, but if you look some of these websites up online, you will be able to find and access some surveillance cameras that are established all across the country, and often are active or show live feeds where you can access these websites. These cameras are capable of seeing you eating your food in your car, talking to your significant other over the phone, jaywalking across the street, and are capable of following you wherever you go. We didn't pay all that much attention to these cameras, as we subconsciously ignore them, as we do not see the potential eyes that can be staring back at us, some of which may have malicious intent. When someone aims a camera at you, do you ignore it and say nothing? Would you sit there and ignore the camera the same way you do surveillance cameras? Most of you who are honest with yourself would likely say no, and would demand that the person who is filming you cease their filming of you. These measures taken by our own government infringe on our freedom of privacy and allow strangers and sometimes the same bad guys our governments claim to protect us from watch us wherever we go. Governments may play a major role in piecing together the puzzle of the pursuit of power over people, but world governments and world leaders are not the only ones who are vying for this sort of power.
Does it? You can't say beer better than Bush.
Many of your favorite brands do their best to control you through everything from the advertisements to the food that they sell you. Take just a brief look throughout history and you will see just how much power advertisements have over people. Subliminal advertising plays a major role in what we purchase and who we decide to support. A short article published in the Journal of Consumer Psychology showed that when dealing with an advertised brand versus the habitual one that a customer will be more likely to buy, subliminal priming would influence people to buy the advertised product over the one that people normally prefer. On top of this, our food is designed to make us addicted. According to an article in the Journal of Clinical Nutrition and Metabolic Care, the reward response in processed sugar is stronger than that of cocaine. Many of your favorite food brands have loads of unnecessary and purposefully added sugars to make their foods taste better and make them more addictive. To say that America is a country full of addicts that are addicted to legal products like sugar, social media, and pornography would not be a far stretch. If you are still not convinced that America is a country of addicts, then perhaps I should remind you of the opioid epidemic that has, by and large, been funded by big pharmaceutical companies that know their substances should be used responsibly and yet continue to push them onto patients who do not need them. You have been led to believe that the human condition is one full of selfish desires and a constant need for both validation and simple pleasures, but it doesn't have to always be this way. Things like this have not always been this way. Many people who grew up during the earlier part of the 20th century can recall a time where advertisements were not everywhere and were not plastered on every visible sign and did not make up a majority of the runtime on our television screens and social media feeds. There is a way for us to be able to get out of all of this mayhem and come closer to helping one another through difficult times, regardless of circumstance and regardless of what any government or corporation might want from us. We need to be truthful not to appease some company or government. We need to be truthful to ourselves and to those who we care about the most. For, within connection, we not only find strength and perspective, we also find hope. Wrapping this series up, I want to talk at length about the future and ways by which we can resist the attempts by both governments and corporations who are all vying to control our minds and control our future. Before I do begin, I am not referring to a revolution, nor am I calling for one. This trilogy of videos has simply been meant to open up the eyes of the people who watch my content, by which to show what I mean when I say that there are those who are trying to control your mind and exert their power over the people. And to further show that I mean no ill intent with this video, and to show that I mean with everything in my mind and body that I want to express my ideas in the best way, in the most organic way to you, in terms of what we need to do to move forward with our future, I have actually set aside my script so that I will not be reading anything off anymore, and I will be simply talking to you in a more one-on-one fashion. So, what exactly do I mean when I say that we need to try and take control of our future? What I mean by that is we need to try and take control of the responsibility that we have over ourselves and over each other, as many of us neglect the responsibility that we have towards ourselves in a personal sense, as well as the responsibility that we have to our community. Yes, many of us are more likely to be more responsible when it comes to the responsibilities that we have set out by our community for us to fulfill. But when it comes to ourselves, many of us neglect the abilities that we have as individuals to grow stronger through connection, and many of us would rather attack each other through different forms of means of social media and participate in what is largely known as cancel culture. What exactly do I mean by cancel culture? In a lot of ways, I'm referring to the drama-esque sort of conversations that happen on social media, from places such as Facebook to Twitter to even Instagram and Snapchat, where people will tend to, in the words of the kids, go off on people simply for things that they had done in the past or because they wanted to try and participate in some form of controversy at the time. There's generally no means by which this form or wave of controversy happens to come about other than perhaps something coming to light from one person's past or another, and then once one thing surfaces, everything else begins to tumble into a downward spiral. See, many corporations capture this sort of attention and try to pivot everything towards them. Many of them are actually trying now to join waves and movements that are generally good in terms of trying to help people, or they have good intentions in trying to help people, and are pushing relentlessly to promote their products and promote anything that they can through which to promote themselves, whether that be people on Twitter who end up getting a viral trending video or a viral trending topic, and they promote something as simple as a SoundCloud, to companies coming in to try and promote their products and services, all the while drama further ensuing because of it and further adding to this drama. This is a tactic that many companies and corporations are more than well aware of and are capitalizing off of and are counting on people to participate in. They count on the controversy. They count on the hive mind mentality. They count on the wave mob of angry people who are going after these sorts of other people and other topics. They live for cancel culture because they understand that when they leap at people's angry intentions and leap at people's outrage, they can often try and get away with a profit afterwards. Many people will often try and promote better services or better products during this controversy so that they can be able to gain some sort of traction as well. This is a form of mind manipulation that many companies and people are trying to do nowadays and are trying to look for ways to be able to manipulate the masses in doing so. What we need to do is, unfortunately, which I have a bad habit of doing as well, we need to unplug from a lot of the social media that we like to use. What I mean unplug is, I mean we need to unplug from our accounts, our notification feeds, and in some cases, set our own phones down. I have a very bad habit of having my own phone constantly on with the notifications for almost every social media site and program that I'm on everything from Discord to Snapchat to Twitter. Constantly and never ending, I have this sort of feeling in the back of my mind that I need to understand and need to be more aware of my own habits, yet I leave these notifications on with the hope that I might be able to gain some form of satisfaction from reading someone's message, or gain some sort of satisfaction from being able to respond to something. This isn't healthy behavior because it drives us further and further away from connecting with people on a more personal level as we further chase this dopamine high that we get from outrage culture and from the drama that we always seem to be ensued in. Yes, certain communities have drama less than others, but that does not mean that they're completely free of this rule. Cancel culture has taken over social media in a lot of ways, and what we need to do moving forward is we need to recognize when something is going too far, and we need to know when to pull away from social media. Many people have been able to pull away now only because of the effect it's had on their mental health. Unfortunately, that's the point that many people get to by the time they're going to have any issues in trying to resolve their drama. They often default to their mental health and pull away from social media when they shouldn't have to in the first place. What I mean by this sobering statement is that we should not be allowing our favorite content creators to get to this point. We should not be forcing people to get to this point. We need to understand and recognize when we are being a part of the issue and when it is time for us to stop and pull away. Cancel culture has led to nothing but the destruction of careers and the lives of so many people, and has done nothing to help further a cause or further help people. Cancel culture only further helps to destroy movements. It does not help in being able to bring anybody up. It only serves to bring people down. And instead of focusing on cancel culture, we should be focusing on connection. What exactly do I mean by connection? I do not exactly refer to a spiritual sense of connection, although those who do participate in religion do have a stronger sense of connection than those who do not. When I'm referring to connection beyond that of a spiritual one is connection between people. Why do I emphasize connection between people? Well, in the words of a certain ape from Planet of the Apes, together, strong. And what I mean by that is when we are stronger together, is that we have a much stronger amount of force when our voices are united as one, and when we are able to help and support one another rather than stand alone. When we have to face adversity, it is much harder for us to be able to face it alone. Some of us may be stronger than others, some stronger willed than others, But at the end of the day, many of us still need help and support from one another to be able to make it out of everything unscathed. And to do that alone is a very tall order. Many of the different forms of adversity we face throughout this life, whether it be being in an insecure home or being homeless, or even having to struggle with a threatened home, to something as simple as boredom. We all suffer in one way or another, whether you are rich or poor, white or black, gay or straight. We all suffer at one point or another, and we all need to understand that when we suffer, it should not be a sign of weakness to reach out to people. It should not be a form of weakness to reach out for help. We should see that as a strength, because when you reach out to someone and are able to gain some form of sense of strength from being with someone, you do gain a form of power. You stand in solidarity with someone. You stand in solidarity with them, understanding that you may face adversity too, but that the overall impact will be far less greater than it would have been alone. You understand that when you are with someone, you are there to help to support them and provide some form of comfort by being able to be there with them. You may not be the comforting type, but being there and being able to help someone serves as a form of comfort because they understand that they have strength in numbers than they do on their own. Being able to be with someone and communicate with someone is vital in human civilization. For when we were hunting tribes many, many thousands of years ago, without any form of connection or unity amongst a group of people, that often meant despair and death. So, to understand this a little bit further, we need to try and understand human nature itself. Many of these companies and corporations want to isolate us and make us feel small. Same with many of the governments who want to be able to have something from us. They want to be able to offer themselves up as a hero, as something that we can look to for guidance and support, when in actuality, the Emperor has no clothes, as you have seen in the previous videos, and we need to be able to stand up for ourselves and stand up with each other as a group. The heroes aren't going to come to save us, so it's up to us to be able to be strong and be with one another in connection. When I say connection, I don't mean connect over your phone and talk to some random person all the time online, although if you live in a long-distance relationship, I imagine that's a good way to keep in touch. What I mean by connection is being able to join a group that you can belong to. What I mean by connection is being able to say that you belong with someone, or that you are a member of a family, that you are a member of a group, that you are a member of society, and that you are able to contribute in one way or another to being able to help that society, group, or family grow. Not just yourself, but the people around you to grow. Isolating yourself off does nothing but further hinder you and hurt you in many instances. So I ask this question to many of you. Would you be willing to put down your smartphone for a day? I know that's a hard question to ask myself, but after making and working on these videos, I think I might be able to give it a shot if many of you are willing to do so in solidarity with me. When it comes down to understanding the mind control and pursuit of power tactics that both governments and corporations have over us, we need to understand that we as a people do have the ability to say no. Many of us do not live in nations where we have to hold our tongue, where we have to watch what we say, where we have to be watchful at every waking moment of the government cracking down on us for something that we say. We have the audacity of saying something wrong in cancel culture. But aside from that, we know that we live in a nation where we are able to speak our minds freely for the most part. Many of you hearing my voice live in nations where you are able to do so. And I commend the nations and the governments who stand with people in terms of being able to have a freedom of speech. And I stand with them in wanting to be able to have a greater connection to the people. For when you understand and know the people, you are able to help make greater changes. As for the people who live in nations that don't have those freedoms and have to hold their tongue, they're the nations that need our help the most. When we stand alone, we do not have as much strength, but when we are united together, we can make a movement that actually causes change for the future. Many of us understand now that the world is changing and that things like climate change are almost inescapable now at this point. things are going to run away very soon if we don't act now. And what I mean by act is act in movements that will be able to help cause actual change. I don't want a revolution. I want reform and change. I want progress, and I think many of you want the same. Many of us want to be able to say that we live in a time greater than any other before things do turn for the worst. And I do want us to be able to say that we live in the greatest time beyond any other time, because we do. We have so many freedoms, so many luxuries, and so many great things in this world now, from working, running toilets, to food that we can go and get at any point in time, to being able to connect with people across the world that we've never even met in person before. We have the ability to make a change if we stand up together and do so. So, this is my ode to the future. May you all live in prosperity and happiness. May you all have a brighter future. And when temptation comes knocking at your door, remember that you have the ability to say no. And when you stand united together, you can and will be able to make a change.